The bar owner's daughter. Have you ever thought you found love in a place where the sun always shines, only to realize it was never love at all? My name is Tom, and I retired here in Thailand, thinking I'd found my second chance at happiness. She was beautiful, sweet, and made me feel young again. But what started as romance ended in the most painful betrayal of my life. Today, I want to share that story with you, not for pity, but as a warning, because if it happened to me, it could happen to you too. Part 1. A New Beginning in Pattaya. You know, when I packed my bags and left Florida at the age of 68, I thought I was walking straight into the paradise that so many guys my age talk about. Palm trees, cheap living, a warm ocean breeze. Maybe, just maybe, a little companionship. I wasn't looking for much, just someone to talk to laugh with, to share a plate of spicy noodles while watching the sun sink into the horizon. My name's Thomas, but most of my friends just call me Tom. I retired after running a small hardware store for decades. My wife passed away 10 years ago. I've got 2 kids, both grown, living their busy lives back in the States. We talk, sure, but it's not the same as having someone right there with you. That silence in the evenings, it gets heavy. So when a buddy of mine told me, Tom, you gotta try Thailand. Pattaya will make you feel 20 years younger. I listened. The first few weeks in Pattaya were like living in a postcard. The beach stretched out like a golden carpet. Food stalls on every corner. Laughter spilling all out of bars. Neon lights flickering like fireflies in the humid night. Everything was cheaper than back home. My pension, which barely covered bills in Florida, felt like a king's ransom here. And that's when I met her. It was a Tuesday night. I wasn't planning to stay out late, just a quick beer, maybe watch some football on the TV screens lined up in the bar. The place was lively, but not overwhelming. The kind of joint where you could still hear your own thoughts. Behind the counter, moving gracefully between tables, was a young woman with long black hair tied neatly in a ponytail. She wasn't dressed like the other girls in the bar. No flashy outfits, no loud makeup. She wore a simple blouse and jeans, like someone who didn't need to prove anything. That was Lek. I didn't know her name at first. Of course, she came over, took my order. And when I tried to thank her in my broken Thai, she laughed, not a fake laugh. Not the kind you hear when people just want your money. It was soft, genuine. Like she found my clumsy effort charming. That laugh hooked me. Over the next few days, I found myself returning to that bar more often than I cared to admit. Not because of the beer, not because of the games on TV, but because of Lek. One evening, she brought me a plate of peanuts without me asking. You like, right? She said in halting English. I nodded. That simple gesture made me feel like someone noticed me again. After years of eating alone, drinking coffee alone, watching TV alone, here was someone paying attention. Soon, I learned a bit more about her. Lek was 30. Though she looked younger, she told me she was the daughter of the bar owner. Her father was older. Not well, so she often helped run the place, unlike the other girls who were clearly working to charm tourists. Lek seemed different. She wasn't sitting on laps, wasn't chasing tips. She just managed the place and smiled when I came in. And let me tell you something, for a guy like me, who'd been out of this dating game for decades, that difference was everything. It made her seem trustworthy, special. I started to open up to her. I told her about Florida, about my late wife, about the hardware store. She listened with this calm, patient look in her eyes. As if my stories mattered, she shared little bits about herself too. How hard it was to take care of her father, how she wished she could study English better, how life wasn't always easy. That tugged at my heart. I thought, here's a girl who isn't like the others. She's got responsibilities. She's grounded. Maybe, just maybe, she's the one. And before long, I noticed the looks from some of the other guys in the bar. You know, the type old foreigners with tanned skin and big bellies? Laughing too loud, waving money around. A few of them gave me nods. Some even smirks, as if they knew something I didn't, but I ignored it. To me, Lek wasn't just another bar girl. She was the bar owner's daughter. I began staying later, talking longer. Sometimes, when the bar got quieter, she'd sit with me for a few minutes. She'd ask questions about America, about my family, about what retirement felt like. And every time, I felt that little spark of connection grow stronger. Looking back now, I realize how quickly I slipped into that dream. A dangerous dream, but at the time, it felt so real, so alive, so much better than the lonely silence I'd left behind in Florida. And that was the beginning me. Thomas, 68 years old, sitting in a bar in Pattaya, convinced I had stumbled upon something rare. A young woman who wasn't chasing money, who wasn't playing games, who might actually see me as more than just another foreign retiree. If only I knew then what I know now. Part 2. Trust is a dangerous currency. When you spend enough time in Pattaya, you start to notice the rhythms of the city. The nights bleed into mornings. The neon lights fade into soft daylight. And the laughter that fills the bars turns into the sound of motorbikes buzzing down the street. For me, though, the rhythm became something else. It became Lek every evening. I found myself drifting back to her father's bar. I told myself it was just for a beer, just for the atmosphere. But deep down, I knew better. I was coming back for her smile, for the way her eyes softened when she listened, for that small spark of youth and warmth that made me feel alive again. And she welcomed me. One night, the bar was unusually quiet. A rainstorm had rolled in, the kind that pounds the pavement like a drummer gone wild. Lek came over with a towel, wiped down the table in front of me, and then, without me asking, sat down across from me. "You lonely?" she asked, tilting her head, her English shaky but clear enough. I chuckled. "Yeah, been lonely for a while." She nodded, and for a moment, there was silence, just the rain outside. Then she said, "My papa, sick. I take care of Bar, take care of him. Sometimes I lonely too." Something inside me shifted right then. It wasn't just attraction anymore. It was sympathy, connection. We were two lonely souls, both carrying weight on our shoulders. That kind of thing bonds you faster than you'd expect. After that, we started spending more time together outside the bar. At first, just short walks to the street market. She showed me her favorite noodle stand, introduced me to mango sticky rice that nearly knocked my socks off, and laughed when I struggled with the chili peppers. But soon, it turned into more. "Tom, you come see my father," she said one afternoon. "He'd like to meet you." Now, that might sound normal, even sweet. But let me tell you, meeting the family in Thailand is a big step. It's not just meet the parents like back home. Sometimes it's a test. Sometimes it's a way of showing you're serious, that you're not just another tourist passing through. Still, I agreed. Her father was a thin, frail man, sitting in the back of the bar with an oxygen tank. He smiled weakly, patted my hand, and said something in Thai I couldn't understand. Lek translated. He say thank you for being kind to me. That moment hit me hard. I felt honored, trusted. It was like being welcomed into a family I didn't even know I wanted. From then on, Lek started opening up more. She told me about her struggles, the bills for her father's medication, the pressure of keeping the bar afloat, how she sometimes wished she had someone to lean on. Being the man I was, with decades of working hard, saving, providing, I wanted to help. You see, that's where guys like me get caught. It's not just about lust or excitement. It's about the instinct to protect, to fix, to take care of someone who seems vulnerable. And Lek knew exactly how to press those buttons, whether she meant to or not. It started small. One night, after closing, she sighed and mentioned the rising cost of her father's medicine. I asked how much. She hesitated, then whispered a number. It wasn't much, not by American standards. Without thinking twice, I handed her the cash. She looked at me with teary eyes, squeezed my hand, and said, "You good man, Tom." That phrase lit me up inside. After years of feeling invisible back home, those 4 words, "You good man," Tom, meant everything. And so I kept helping. A little for groceries here, a little for a repair bill there. It felt good. Felt natural. It felt like building a partnership, the kind I thought I had lost forever when my wife passed away. But looking back, I can see the pattern forming. You start by giving a little because you care. Then you give a little more because you're invested. Before you know it, you're not just buying meals or medicine. You're financing dreams that aren't yours. At the time, though, I didn't see it. All I saw was a young woman who sat beside me, who laughed at my corny jokes, who held my arm when we crossed the busy street. All I saw was hope. There was one evening that really stands out. We were sitting on the beach, the sun melting into the ocean. Her head resting lightly on my shoulder, she whispered, "Tom, I never meet man like you before. Other foreigners, they only want fun. You different." That hit me like a hammer straight to the chest. I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe I found my second chance at love. But here's what I wish I'd known then, and what I want every one of you watching this to take to heart in Pattaya. Trust is a dangerous currency. Once you give it away too freely, it's nearly impossible to get it back. At that moment, though, I wasn't thinking about caution. I was thinking about her, about us, about the life I thought we could build together. And so, I let my guard down. That was the start of the slide the slow, steady way. I let Lek not only into my heart, but into my wallet. And once that door was open, it was almost impossible to close. If I had known how far it would go, I might have walked away that night, but instead, I leaned in closer, kissed her on the forehead, and promised myself I'd do whatever it took to make her life easier. And that promise, that was the beginning of my downfall. Part 3. The slow pull of dependence. When you're retired, time feels different. Back in the States, my days used to be filled with routine yard work, coffee at the diner, maybe a walk around the block. But in Pattaya, with Lek around, time seemed to melt away. Days bled into nights, and nights bled into mornings. I wasn't just passing the hours anymore. I was living again. Or so I thought. At first, it felt harmless. I'd wake up in my small apartment, grab a coffee, and wander down to the bar. Lek would greet me with that smile. The kind of smile that makes you forget you're a 67-year-old widower who left behind a quiet suburban life. Suddenly, I wasn't old Tom anymore. I was someone worth waiting for. But that's the thing about attention. Once you taste it after years of loneliness, it becomes addictive. And Lek, whether consciously or not, knew how to feed that addiction. It started with small gestures. She'd save me the best seat in the bar. She'd set aside a cold beer before I even asked. If I didn't show up one evening, she'd message me, "Where you I wait." That simple phrase, "I wait," did something to me. I hadn't felt like someone was waiting for me in a very long time. One evening, As we sat together after closing, she said, "Tom, you make me happy, you good man." Those words again. They were like a key, turning deeper into my heart. But alongside the sweetness, little cracks began to show. One night, her phone rang while we were sitting together. She answered quickly, speaking in Thai, her voice sharp and urgent. When she hung up, I asked if everything was okay. She sighed and said, "Papa medicine. Hospital say need more." Without hesitation, I asked, "How much?" She looked down, hesitant, then showed me a slip of paper with numbers I couldn't fully read. I pulled out the money anyway. She kissed my cheek. "Tom, you save us. Now, listen. Folks, here's where I should have stepped back. Here's where I should have asked for receipts. Asked for details. Maybe even gone with her to the hospital. But I didn't. Why? Because when you're wrapped up in that mix of romance and sympathy, your judgment gets cloudy. You don't want to see red flags. You want to see hope, and Lek was good at weaving hope. She began talking about the future. "Tom, maybe one day we open small restaurant. Not bar, nice place, family come. You sit, relax, I cook." I'll admit, the picture she painted was beautiful. Me, sitting under a fan, sipping cold beer, while she served customers with that radiant smile. It felt like a second chance at the family life I thought I'd lost forever. So, little by little, I gave more money for her father's medicine, money for new chairs in the bar, money for her younger brother's school fees. Each request came wrapped in the language of family, responsibility, and care. And each time, she reassured me with words that sank deep into my bones. "You different. You good man." But something inside me, some quiet voice I tried to ignore, began to whisper, "Are you being played?" That voice got louder one evening when I showed up at the bar earlier than usual. Lek wasn't there. Her aunt was tending the counter. I asked where Lek was, and she shrugged, saying in broken English, "Busy. Go out." Later that night, Lek appeared. Flustered, apologetic, "Sorry. Tom, I go see friend. She have problem?" I nodded, but something didn't sit right. I didn't press. Didn't want to seem jealous or controlling, but that seed of doubt had been planted. The next week, another incident. A Thai man came into the bar, spoke quickly to Lek, and handed her a small envelope. She slipped it into her purse without a word. I asked who he was. She smiled and said, "Friend. He helped with Papa medicine." Then she changed the subject. "Now, if you're listening to this and shaking your head, thinking, 'Come on, Tom, how could you not see it?' Believe me, I ask myself the same thing. But when you're in the middle of it, when your heart is involved, the warning signs don't look like warnings. They look like minor bumps in an otherwise smooth road." And here's the truth. I didn't want to lose her. At my age, the idea of starting over again, of walking back to my empty apartment with no one waiting for me, terrified me. So I ignored the doubts. I chose to believe the story she painted because it was easier than facing the possibility that I was just another mark in a long game. It wasn't all manipulation, though, at least it didn't feel like it. We had real moments together, quiet dinners, laughter over silly English-Thai miscommunications, long walks along the beach. Those moments felt genuine. They reminded me of the man I used to be before life became about doctor appointments and managing loneliness. But mixed with those moments was a growing dependency. She relied on me for money. I relied on her for emotional connection. And that, my friends, is a dangerous balance. Because once someone holds the keys to your heart and your wallet, you're no longer standing on solid ground. One night, as we sat on the balcony of her apartment, she leaned against me and whispered, Tom, I don't know what I'd do without you. I should have recognized it for what it was, a subtle tightening of the hook. But instead, I wrapped my arm around her and thought, maybe I finally matter to someone again. And that's how it happens, not all at once, not with a big con or a dramatic scam. It happens in slow drips, like water carving away stone. You give a little here, a little there, until one day you look back and realize you've given away more than you ever intended. By the time I realized just how deep I was in, it was already too late to pull back, but that's for the next part of the story. Part 4. Cracks in the illusion. When you live in Thailand long enough, you start to notice patterns, the same smiles, the same polite greetings, the same stories whispered from one expat to another. I had been in Pattaya nearly a year when I started hearing them, not about Lek directly, but about girls like her. Guys at the expat cafe would talk. Some had horror stories about losing tens of thousands of dollars. Others claimed their Thai girlfriends were angels who saved them from despair. I sat there, sipping my coffee, nodding, but never admitting how deep I was already in with Lek, because in my mind, she was different. She had to be, but deep down, I knew something wasn't adding up. The first real crack came on a Wednesday night. I'd gone to the bar earlier than usual, hoping to surprise Lek, but when I walked in, she wasn't there. Instead, I found her aunt behind the counter again, nervously fidgeting. "She go, Bangkok," the aunt said, avoiding my eyes. "Bangkok." For what I asked, she muttered something in Thai, then forced a smile. "Family business." Now, I'm not a suspicious man by nature, but something in her tone didn't sit right. Lek hadn't mentioned anything about Bangkok, and when she finally messaged me later that night, her excuse was vague. "Papa need checkup. I go with him." The problem: her father was supposedly too sick to leave his bed the week before. I remember sitting in my apartment, phone in hand, rereading her message until the words blurred. Was she lying, or was I overthinking it? The second crack came not long after. We were having dinner at a small seafood place near the beach. The sun was setting, casting orange light over the waves. It should have been one of those perfect moments you tuck away in your memory. But then her phone buzzed. She looked down, froze, and quickly flipped it face down on the table. I chuckled. "Who's that?" "Another admirer." She forced a laugh. "Just friend." Not important, but the way her cheeks flushed, the way she avoided my eyes, it gnawed at me. For the rest of the meal, I couldn't shake the thought, if I wasn't the only one, what did that make me? The third crack. That one hurt the most. One night, after the bar closed, I helped her count the day's earnings. She leaned against me, playful, pretending to fumble with the bills. Then she looked serious. "Tom, I worry. Bar no make enough. Rent go up. Papa medicine more. I don't know how we do." My chest tightened. I wanted to be her hero, her solution. So I asked, "How much do you need?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Maybe 80,000 baht, just to cover." I pay back. Promise, 80,000 baht. Roughly $2,300. That wasn't pocket change, even for me. But when she reached over and touched my hand, her eyes glossy, I couldn't resist. I withdrew the money the next day. For weeks afterward, she showered me with affection. She messaged constantly, called me my strong man, told me she dreamed of our future together. And for a while, I let myself believe it. But then, late one night, I walked past a bar 2 streets over. Music was blaring, lights flashing. Out of curiosity, I peeked inside, and my heart nearly stopped. There was Lek, not behind the counter, not tending to her family's bar, but sitting on a customer's lap, laughing like she used to laugh with me. I froze. My feet felt like concrete. I wanted to storm in, demand answers, but something held me back. Instead, I stood in the shadows, watching her sip from a man's glass, her hand resting on his knee. It felt like someone had punched me in the gut. The next morning, when I confronted her, she didn't deny being there. She spun a story. Tom, you don't understand. He friend of family. He give money to bar. I just talk, nothing more. Please. You trust me. And you know what? I let it slide. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her because the alternative that I was just another fool, another paycheck was too painful to accept. But the cracks kept widening. A week later, I noticed she had a new gold necklace. When I asked where it came from, she smiled and said, "Gift from cousin." Funny thing was, I'd never heard of that cousin before. Then came the nights she'd disappear for hours. Claiming she had to take care of family matters, she grew more distracted, checking her phone constantly. Whispering in Thai when she thought I wasn't listening, and me I kept paying for rent, for medicine, for repairs at the bar, for emergencies that always seemed to pop up right after she gave me one of those long, soulful looks. By now, I wasn't just financially invested. I was emotionally trapped. The more I gave, the harder it became to admit I might be wrong about her, because if she was scamming me, what did that make me? Gullible, desperate, pathetic? No man wants to see himself that way, especially not in his golden years. The breaking point came one humid night in July. I received a message from another expat friend, Mark, a guy I'd met at a coffee shop. It was a blurry photo, taken at a night market. The caption read, "Isn't this your girl?" In the photo, Lek was holding hands with a younger Thai man. They weren't just walking side by side. They were entwined, laughing, looking every bit like a couple. My heart pounded in my chest. I wanted to throw my phone across the room. Part of me screamed that it had to be a misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew the illusion was shattering. When I confronted Lek that night, she cried, big, dramatic tears. She swore the man was her cousin again. She begged me to believe her, clinging to my arm, whispering, "You only one for me. Tom, please don't leave me." I should have walked away. Every sign pointed to the truth, but as I sat there, her head buried in my shoulder, I realized how much I feared being alone again, and so, against all reason, I stayed. That's the cruel thing about these kinds of relationships. It's not just about money. It's about the human need for connection, for validation, for love, even if it's only an illusion. And when you're a retiree, far from home, far from family, that illusion can feel more real than the truth. But illusions can only last so long before reality tears them apart. And for me, reality was about to hit harder than I ever imagined. Part 5. The collapse. I used to think betrayal was a sudden thing, like a knife in the back, quick and sharp. But the truth is, betrayal often comes slowly, like water eroding stone. By the time you realize what's happening, it's already too late. For me, that realization came in stages until everything collapsed at once. It started with the bank. I'd gone in to withdraw cash for rent when the teller frowned. "Sir, your account balance is very low. Do you want to make a transfer from your savings?" Her words hit me like ice water. My balance was less than 40,000 baht, barely enough for a month's living. I had been dipping into my retirement savings so often. I hadn't noticed how fast it was dwindling. Lek had always said it was temporary. Once bar busy, we pay back. But the bar was never busy enough, and the debts never stopped. I left the bank that day with a pit in my stomach. The second blow came a week later. I was walking back from the market when I heard laughter spilling out from a side alley. Something in that laugh made me stop cold. I knew it too well. I turned and saw her. Lek was leaning against a motorbike, her hand tracing circles on a young Thai man's chest. He couldn't have been older than 30. They were laughing, close, too close. I stood there, groceries in hand, heart pounding. For a second, I considered storming up, shouting, demanding answers, but my feet stayed rooted. Instead, I watched as he kissed her cheek, and she didn't pull away. I went home in silence. My hands shook so badly, I dropped the eggs on the floor. That night, I asked her about it. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Tom, you see wrong." That not me? I wanted to scream, to call her a liar. But instead, I nodded, pretending to believe. Because the alternative was unbearable, admitting that I had been nothing more than a wallet to her all along. But illusions only stretch so far before they snap. One night in late August, I came to the bar earlier than usual. It was quiet, too quiet. The neon sign flickered, half burned out. When I stepped inside, the place was empty. No Lek, no aunt, no music. Just dust on the counter and chairs stacked against the wall. Confused, I called her phone. No answer. I tried again. Still nothing. Panic set in. I walked around the block, checked nearby shops. Even went to her apartment. The door was locked, the lights off. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I returned to the bar. This time, her aunt was there. She looked nervous, avoiding my eyes. "Where's Lek?" I demanded. The woman sighed. "She go Bangkok with boyfriend." It felt like the floor collapsed beneath me. "Boyfriend," I repeated, my voice cracking. She nodded, almost apologetic. "She not come back?" "Sorry." "Tom." I stumbled outside, my legs barely holding me. The world spun. For a long time, I just sat on the curb, staring at the dusty street, the stray dogs wandering past, the tuk-tuks honking in the distance. I wanted it to be a nightmare. I wanted to wake up in my apartment in Florida, hear the gulls, smell the ocean. But I wasn't in Florida. I was in Pattaya, broke, humiliated, and alone. The next few days were a blur. I checked my accounts. Between rent, loans to Lek, and bar expenses, I'd lost nearly $60. Years of careful saving evaporated in less than a year. I called her phone again and again. Finally, it disconnected completely. A part of me still wanted to believe she'd explain everything. That maybe she'd come back, apologize, tell me it was all a misunderstanding. But that call never came. Instead, I started hearing stories from other expats, from locals, from whispers in cafes and bars. "She's done this before," one guy told me, shaking his head. "She ropes in older foreigners, bleeds them dry, then moves on." Classic Pattaya story. Each word was a nail in the coffin of my pride. I remember sitting alone in my apartment one night, staring at the empty beer bottle on the table. The TV played some Thai soap opera in the background, but I wasn't watching. All I could think about was how stupid I had been, how I'd ignored every red flag, every warning, how I'd let loneliness blind me. I wasn't just broke, I was broken. Worse, I was ashamed that I'd let myself be conned, ashamed that I'd believed in a fantasy, ashamed that I'd fallen for a smile and a soft touch. In America, I'd been careful, logical, a man who planned for retirement. In Thailand, I had been a fool, and the cruelest part, deep down, I still missed her. Even knowing the truth, I missed her laugh, her hand on mine, the way she made me feel alive again. That was the most painful betrayal of all. Not what she took from my wallet, but what she took from my heart. By the end of that month, I was faced with two choices: pack up and crawl back to the States, or stay in Thailand and somehow rebuild. But before I could make that decision, I knew I had to face the hardest truth of all. I wasn't a victim of bad luck. I had chosen this. I had ignored the warnings. I had played along with the illusion because it made me feel less alone. And illusions always come at a price. For me, that price was everything I thought I had built in my golden years. And now, with my savings gutted and my pride shattered, I had to decide what kind of man I was going to be next. Part 6. The quiet decision. There's a strange kind of silence that comes after your world collapses. Not the peaceful kind, no. It's heavier than that. It's the silence of an empty room where someone's laughter used to be. It's the silence of your phone that never rings. No matter how many times you stare at it, for weeks after Lek disappeared, I lived inside that silence. I'd wake up in the mornings and sit at the small balcony of my apartment, watching the tuk-tuks pass by. The heat rose from the street, the air thick with the smell of grilled chicken and exhaust. Pattaya was still alive, still buzzing. But for me, it felt like everything had stopped. I wasn't Tom anymore. I was just another old man who'd been played. At first, I thought of running, flying back to Florida, cutting my losses, licking my wounds. But the truth was, I didn't have much waiting for me there. My house had been sold. My friends were scattered, and my family lived their own busy lives. Going back would mean admitting defeat, not just to them, but to myself. So I stayed, and in that staying, I began to see things differently. I walked more, without Lek beside me. Without the constant drain of her needs, I had time to actually look around. I saw the other retirees. Men like me, some with younger women on their arms, others sitting alone at cafes with beers in hand. Some looked happy, others looked hollow. I realized I wasn't alone in this story. My tragedy was their tragedy too, told in different names and faces. And strangely, that thought gave me comfort. One evening, I met an older expat named Bill at a quiet bar far from the neon chaos of Walking Street. He'd lived in Thailand for nearly 20 years. His hair was white, his skin weathered by the sun. But his eyes were sharp. We got to talking, and I told him about Lek. Not everything, but enough. He just nodded slowly, sipping his whiskey. She's not the first, he said. His voice calm. Won't be the last either. The thing you gotta understand, Tom, is it's never about you. It's about survival. You got money. They want security. And sometimes, they don't care what's left of you when they're done. His words stung, but there was no malice in them. Just truth. Then what's the answer, I asked. Bill smiled faintly. You learn, you stop expecting fairy tales. You build a life that doesn't depend on someone else filling the holes in your heart. Otherwise, you'll keep falling for the same game. That night, lying in bed, I thought about what he'd said. And for the first time, I began to see Lek not as the love of my life, not even as a villain, but as part of a larger story, one that many men like me walk into blind. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in months. I cleaned my apartment. I opened the curtains, let the sunlight in. I even went down to the local market, bought fresh vegetables, and cooked for myself. It was such a small act, but it felt monumental because for the first time since she left, I wasn't doing something out of anger or grief or longing. I was doing it for me. Slowly, the fog began to lift. I started writing in a notebook. Just thoughts. Memories, little lessons I wished someone had told me before I came here. Things like, don't confuse attention with love. Don't lend what you can't afford to lose. Don't ignore the red flags, no matter how sweet the smile. At first, it was therapy, but then I thought, maybe, just maybe, these words could help someone else avoid the same fate. And that's when the quiet decision began to take shape. I wasn't going to leave Thailand, but I wasn't going to stay the same either. Instead, I decided to live differently. No more chasing illusions. No more trying to buy love with dollars I couldn't spare. No more building castles on sand. I would live simply, honestly, carefully, and I would tell my story not to shame myself, but to warn others, to let other men know that beneath the palm trees and the smiles, there are storms waiting. That retirement abroad can be beautiful, but only if you walk into it with open eyes. The last time I saw Lek was by accident. Months later, I spotted her across a crowded night market in Bangkok. She was with another foreigner, laughing, holding his arm the way she once held mine. For a moment, my chest tightened. The memories came rushing back, the warmth, the hope, the lies. But then something surprising happened. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel longing. I just felt nothing. And in that nothing, there was peace. I turned away, bought myself a bowl of noodles, and walked into the night. That's the quiet decision I made, and the one I live by now. I can't change what happened. I can't get back the money, or the time, or the love I thought was real. But I can choose what happens next. I can choose to stop being a victim. I can choose to live the rest of my life with dignity. I can choose to speak so others don't fall silent into the same trap. Because in the end, betrayal doesn't define you. What defines you is what you do after. And me, I choose to walk forward lighter, wiser, and finally free. When I look back, I don't see myself as a fool anymore. I see a man who believed too much, trusted too deeply, and learned the hard way. And maybe that's the real reason I'm telling you this story, so that you don't have to learn it the way I did. Retirement in Thailand, or anywhere abroad, can be paradise, but only if you keep your eyes open and your heart guarded. Don't mistake attention for love, and don't give away what you can't afford to lose. Because in the end, your peace, your dignity, your freedom, that's worth more than any fleeting romance.